After their first season being left behind out of the Power Four, Oregon State went 5-7, and they made some big moves in the offseason to try and get back up to the level of competition that we need to see from this program. And that big move was bringing in Malik Murphy from Duke out of the transfer portal. Duke went 9-3 last year, and Murphy started all 12 games. He had a really, really solid season and looks to bring that winning culture over to the Beavers. Taking a look at their schedule, I got a few tricky games on here. Texas Tech and Oregon, obviously, going to be the two most difficult ones. The only other thing of note, really, is the fact that they do play Washington State twice because they were unable to find enough non-conference opponents. Both them and the Cougars were, so they agreed to play a home and home series in the same season. Other than that, this is a very, very manageable schedule for Oregon State.
Yeah, the only difficult thing about the schedule, honestly, is just a long stretch of games to start the season, and that begins with hosting Cal. Now, Cal is a team that we initially were very, very high on. They were very active in the transfer portal, brought in Devin Brown from Ohio State to compete for that starting quarterback position, and initially did return Jaden Ott as their starting running back. But since the spring transfer portal opened up, Cal has lost five running backs from their roster, including Jaden Ott, who is committed and transferred to Oklahoma. So this does not fully reflect that much transfer activity in the spring window. So this percentage could bump up, especially with, like Jonah said, Malik Murphy stepping into the starting quarterback role at Oregon State. So Oregon State looks like a solid team. 30% chance for what we had initially, but this could easily bump up to like a 50-50 chance considering how much Cal is losing. But Cal's still going to be a pretty decent team, so this game will be very interesting to kick off both these team seasons. Following week against Fresno State, Fresno State has been a very decent team out of the Mountain West, has had a couple flashes here and there, but overall, I do think Oregon State is going to be the better team, especially with Malik Murphy as their starting quarterback. A lot more experience of playing against high level competition. So Oregon State should be in good shape. A 75% chance here. Fresno State, I believe, has made some additions in the transfer portal and did have a pretty good season last year. So that's why it's not any higher than the 75%, but still should be a very manageable game for this Beavers team. Then they go on the road to face Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech is a team in the Big 12 that we are very high on, a team that we expect to cause a lot of chaos in the conference, maybe get close to getting to that Big 12 championship game. Um, they have a brand new football facility on campus that should be a game changer for the program. They're returning a lot of starting production after a pretty successful season. I think with it being on the road, even with the transfers Oregon State has coming in, I think Texas Tech is going to be the better team with the home field advantage. So only a 20% chance for the Beavers here. Then they got the in-state rivalry game that happens early on in the season against the Ducks. Now, Oregon did go undefeated during the regular season last year, finished as the number one team in the country for losing to Ohio State in that Rose Bowl game. Now, a lot of concern is surrounding Oregon with their quarterback play because Dante Moore is expected to be the starter. And while he does have starting experience at a Power 4 school at UCLA, some worry that that starting experience is not comparable to some of the other quarterbacks that we're going to see this season, and worry that maybe Oregon's going to take a little bit of a backseat or just a little bit more regression compared to last season. But I think Oregon is going to be just fine. They have a lot of returning production from their offensive skill players, have recruited insanely well, and should have just as good a defense that they did last year. And I think with Dan Lanning being the offensive mastermind that he is, I think Dante Moore is going to be just fine in this Oregon system. So I think with it being on the road, even for the Ducks, I think they're still going to be the better team. Maybe with Malik Murphy, this becomes a more interesting game, but I do think the Ducks are going to be able to get the job done here. So a 20% chance for the Beavers once again in this game. Then they face the Houston Cougars. Connor Wegman is transferring in from Texas A&M to be the starting quarterback for Houston after a pretty disappointing season. And they really need a spark to be lit for this offense. Last year, they were abysmal. They just did not look like they were a very good offensive team. And hopefully, Connor Wigman's able to provide that spark. He did show some flashes at Texas A&M, but did end up getting benched for Marcel Reed, who is now expected to be the starter this upcoming season. But I think he has a real chance to develop here at Houston and maybe elevate this program a little bit. But I do think, once again, Oregon State should be the better team, a little bit more talented compared to Houston. I would take Malik Murphy over Connor Wakeman in this quarterback battle. So a 65% chance for Oregon State to beat the Cougars here. Then they go on the road to face Appalachian State, one of the better teams historically out of their conference, but last year they weren't as good as some people were expecting. They had a little bit of regression, and just compared to this Oregon State team, just the talent disparity is going to be pretty large after that down year for Appalachian State. So an 85% chance for the Beavers to get the win on the road. Then they face Wake Forest at home. Wake Forest was one of the worst teams in the ACC last year, and it's probably going to be one of the worst again. I think they're going to slide a little bit more in the ACC standings because I think teams like Florida State are going to improve drastically in the ACC standings and just in general. So I think Wake Forest is in for a little bit of a rough season. And that's a long road trip for them as well, going all the way out to Oregon. So an 80% chance for the Beavers to get the win here.
Next up is a game against Lafayette, and that is not Louisiana Lafayette, the FBS team. It's just the Lafayette Leopards. They're an FCS school, and there is a 0% chance that they beat Oregon State. After their first bye week, which comes very late in the season there at the end of October, back at home to face Washington State. And this is the first of two matchups with the Cougars, like I mentioned earlier. And we do like Oregon State better than Washington State this year. Uh, Zevi Eckhouse is the closest I think I can get to pronouncing his name correctly. That's the current favorite to be Washington State's quarterback. I like Malik Murphy a lot more. And home field advantage definitely going to play a factor because as you can see a little bit later on, these percentages are different for the two games against Washington State. First one though, I think Oregon State's got about a 65% chance to get the job done. Then it's a matchup with Sam Houston, their second year in the FBS. They had a very, very successful first season, going 10-3 with a bowl game win. And overall, they're a pretty solid team. So this is no pushover for Oregon State at home. We're going to go about 60% for the Beavers to pull out a win here. Definitely some upset potential in that game. So don't just check that one off as a win at the start of the year. Then it's a road trip to Tulsa. And even though this one's on the road, Tulsa was 3-9 last season. They don't look to be getting much better. Uh, this is a very, very bad team. I think they're going to struggle once again. Oregon State should be able to take care of business on the road at an 85% chance. And then, don't want to repeat myself too much. Same matchup with Washington State here. They're going on the road this time. I think this one's a lot closer to a coin flip. I definitely think there's a good chance that Murphy and the Beavers can get it done on the road as well. If I had to pick, I would say that Oregon State has a better chance to win both of these games than Washington State does for sure. But maybe even a slightly better chance that Oregon State goes 2-0 than just splits these. But for right now, we are going to say 45% chance for Oregon State to win that one.
The schedule as a whole, really, it's just that stretch of games to start the season. You have a couple tough opponents in there, with that being Texas Tech and Oregon. But other than that, this looks like a very manageable season for this Beavers team, especially bringing in such a strong transfer portal class. I think the sky's the limit for this team. I think that Oregon and Texas Tech game are probably going to be losses. And if Cal can still keep it together despite losing her entire running back room, I think that 9 to 10 wins isn't exactly out of the question, but I think realistically, 7, 8 wins is probably where this team will end up. 9 wins, I think, would be the max, I would say. But it's really just going to depend on how Malik Murphy fits into this Oregon State system. But like I said, this team could really surprise some people, especially if they're able to get the sweep over Washington State and get really close to getting 10 wins.
Yeah, I've seen some people say that Oregon State can make the playoffs, and I don't know if I would go that far, but there is a path for it, and it's not a 0% chance. I'll say that. Uh, I mean, if you beat Texas Tech on the road and the only game you lose is to Oregon, then it could happen. I just don't really think that's an incredibly likely scenario. There's a good chance that we're going to see Oregon State go, 8-4, 9-3, somewhere in there. Um, we're definitely going to pay attention to this Oregon State spring game and see how Malik Murphy fits into the offense. And I mean, there's a chance that we improve our prediction for 2025, which for right now, we're going to go with a conservative 8-4, which is still a big improvement from 5-7 in 2024. The projected win total sitting at 7.3 wins. But that should also be a little bit higher because, like we said earlier, we're going to increase that percentage to beat Cal, some stuff like that. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can come back for our next Oregon State prediction video later in the off season once we finished up with all of the other teams' schedule previews. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.